So back to the screen. Here we go. Just wait for it to load. There we go. All right. So um, the key vocabulary here: prokaryotic cell and prokaryote, eukaryotic cell and eukaryote. Those are just different parts of speech. Okay. So if you see this ending, prokaryotic, with this IC on here, that's an adjective. So it's describing a noun cell. Okay. So it's telling me that that cell is prokaryotic. If it's prokaryote, that's referring to a specific cell. So that's a noun. Okay. They mean the same thing in terms of the characteristics that the cell has. It's just, are you using it as an adjective or a noun? Okay. So it's actually two things you need to remember for today, not four. Okay. You just have to remember that one's an adjective, one's a noun. Okay. Now, all living things for our purposes today are made of cells. We are not including viruses in this conversation because scientists don't agree that they're made of, or that they're alive. And one of the main reasons for that is that they're not made of cells. So if we use the cell theory, viruses cannot be alive. Okay. Now, every living thing can be placed into one of these six major groups. And the six major groups are bacteria, archaea, plantae, protista, fungi, and animalia. Now, there is a line dividing these groups. So if you look at this picture, what groups are considered to be prokaryotes? According to this picture, what groups are prokaryotes? Bailey? Which of these groups are prokaryotes?
Bacteria and Argentina.
Okay. What'd you say? Yes, the bottom. Okay, so correct. Thank you. Who volunteered that answer? Who was that?
Contagious.
Okay, great job. So we had one right answer in class and on Zoom. Okay. So bacteria and archaea are the two groups of living things that are considered to be prokaryotic. Okay. Everything else, so plants, animals, fungi, and protists, are eukaryotes. Okay. Now, most of the cells we just looked at on the microscope, all the big cells moving back and forth, most of those were protista. Do you remember we said, well, they weren't quite animals, they weren't quite plants, they had some characteristics of both? That's protists. Okay. Even though they're not as complex or plants as plants or animals, though, you saw a lot of parts in that cell, right? Like it had little organelles all over it, right? So they're still complex cells, and they were still pretty big. That was only 100 times magnification. So that means that's pretty big for a cell, okay? And we could still see them, okay? Now, we don't know yet. I haven't told you yet what makes something a prokaryote and what makes something a eukaryote, and I will in a moment. But before I do, I want to show you the things they have in common. There are four main traits that I want you to remember all cells have. No matter what cell you're talking about, they have these four things. Okay? So, all cells have cytoplasm. Now, I'm going to show myself on the screen here because I'm going to use a balloon as an example here. Now, this isn't a perfect metaphor, this balloon, because it doesn't act exactly like a cell, but it gives us an idea at least, okay? Now, why isn't this cell flat? Or I'm sorry, why isn't this balloon flat? Oh, it's filled with air, right? So cells are filled with things too. Cells are filled with what's called cytoplasm. Now, cytoplasm is mostly made of water, and then anything else that's in the cell floats in the cytoplasm, okay? So in this case, the air in this balloon is representing the cytoplasm. All cells also have ribosomes. Ribosomes are tiny little circles, basically, and they build proteins inside living things. Now, ribosomes are technically considered to be an organelle, but they're different than other organelles. So even prokaryotes have ribosomes, okay? Next, the cell membrane. Now, it's not called the cell membrane. I typed membrane twice. My apologies. In this balloon, what is the cell membrane here? The latex, yes, the outside of the balloon, right? It keeps the air inside. It separates the air inside from the environment, right? And to get inside, you'd have to go through the cell membrane, okay? All cells have that layer on the outside. Now, the last thing that all cells have is DNA. All cells, even a bacterium, have DNA, which is genetic material. Okay, so if these are all the similarities, then what are the differences between these two major types of cells? Okay, well, let's talk about eukaryotes first. Well, hang on, sorry. Before we get to that, if you can remember one thing today, this would be a really good thing to remember. So prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Eukaryotes do. Now, what is a nucleus, you might ask? Well, it is where our genetic information is stored. So it's like almost a cell inside of a cell, and the DNA is inside there if you are eukaryotic. If you're prokaryotic, you don't have a nucleus, so your genetic material is just floating in the cytoplasm. So if you're a bacterium, remember we said bacteria and archaea are prokaryotic. If you're a bacterium, that means your DNA is just floating in the cytoplasm. Not very safe for you. Okay? So, eukaryotic cells, which are plants, animals, fungi, and protists, okay, protect their DNA inside a nucleus, which is again another little cell inside of a cell. Okay? Now, to try to picture that, I'm going to show you the eukaryotic cell first. So, this is just a generic eukaryotic cell. Okay? You'll notice it has a lot of parts, right? Look at all of these tiny little organs inside of it. Okay? Right? You see all of these? For those on Zoom, this is what I'm talking about. All these little parts inside of you. Okay? Each of those parts has a different job. Okay? And these are what we call the membrane bound organelles. Organelle just means little bodies or little organs, is a better way to remember it, maybe. And that's inside eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells also then have the DNA inside the nucleus. This biggest organelle is the nucleus. Okay, so you can see some of it's been cut away there to show inside, and all of the material inside here, these little ridges, that is all the DNA. That's DNA. Okay, so what does a prokaryotic cell look like then? That's on the next slide. Now, prokaryotic cells, are smaller, much smaller than eukaryotic cells. They have no nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles, and look what it does with its DNA. The DNA is just floating in the cytoplasm here. It's not contained in a nucleus. Okay? Now, what else do you notice about this cell? What does it have that the animal cell didn't have? It's not, you don't have to read the little words. It's really obvious right on the outside. Yeah, it looks like a string, right? So we call this a flagellum. And it's like a little tail. It beats back and forth like that. And it's how the cell moves. Okay? It can also grab things with that tail and pull them in. Okay? That's a major difference as well. Now, if you're having trouble remembering this, just do this. Okay? Okay, just do this. Okay? Remember, pro means no. Eu means do. Prokaryote, means no nucleus, no membrane bound organelles. Eukaryote, means do. Eukaryotes do have a nucleus with the DNA inside. They do have membrane bound organelles. Now, a moment ago, when you saw those big cells moving around in the pond water, did they have organelles inside of them? Did you see like little pieces inside of the cell? Yes, you did, right? So that tells me, A, you know they're big because I told you they were, relatively speaking. You know they have parts inside of them, little organs. So then, were those cells prokaryotic or eukaryotic? Yeah, most likely they were eukaryotic, right? Now, okay, we don't know for sure because we didn't identify the parts, but chances are there would not be that big a bacteria. Bacteria are much, much smaller than that, okay? Even on 400 times magnification, which would be four, like, like 300 times bigger than what we were looking at, it would still be very hard to see bacteria. Those big cells in there probably eat bacteria. Okay, so that gives you some idea of size here. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, so this is a summary. Prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells share four common parts, which are cytoplasm, DNA, plasma membrane, which is the same as the cell membrane, they mean the same thing, and ribosomes. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus or organelles, and the DNA is just floating in the cytoplasm. Yes. Yes. Perfect. Yes, please. Okay. Then, um, eukaryotic cells have a nucleus and they have membrane-bound organelles, right? And the DNA inside eukaryotic cells would be protected inside the nucleus. That nucleus is surrounded by another membrane, so the DNA is not in the cytoplasm. It's inside the nucleus. Okay? Now, let's pause for a moment before we go on to the last page of your notes. Are there any questions on any of this material? No. How many people have learned about this before? Okay.
Me.
Some
Me.
people have.
Yes.
Okay. 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 Good. Well, that's great. So hopefully we're only going to spend one day on the difference between these two. And then I'm going to assume that most people have learned about organelles before, like the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome, things like that. So I will be doing more of an overview with you the next 2 days, and you will be doing some independent projects on organelles, okay? Now, the last thing I'm going to show you today is the chart that is in your notes. So if you go to Schoology, stop sharing now. If you go to Schoology, you should be able to see that there is a document that says, guided notes, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, guided notes answer key. Okay? So prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, guided notes answer key. Okay? Inside that key, you will find all of the answers to the guided notes in case you missed anything. Okay? I am going to pull this document up now because the last thing we're going to do today is look at the chart. Okay? Looking at the chart. The chart, all of the answers for the chart are located inside of this answer key. Okay? So here we go. Back up just a little here. There we go. Okay. So this is on Schoology. Okay. So you see, prokaryotes are bacteria and archaea. Eukaryotes are everything else: animals, plants, fungi, and protists. Okay. Now, level of organization, this goes back to yesterday. Prokaryotes are unicellular or single celled. Eukaryotes are both. They could be single celled, like the things we looked at today, or they could be made of many cells, like you and me, or this plant over here. Okay? So their size is also different. So this U looking M, that's called a micrometer. Okay? Now, bacteria are 1 to 10 of those long. Okay? Eukaryotes are 10 to 100. Now, of course, these are generalizations. Okay? These aren't exact measurements, but they give you an idea just of their relative size. Okay? Now, I cannot stress this enough. Cell walls are not a determining feature of whether something is prokaryotic or eukaryotic. There are prokaryotic cells that have a cell wall, and there are eukaryotic cells that have cell walls. Okay? The cell wall would be located outside of the cell membrane, and it's like another layer of protection around the cell. Animal cells don't have them, and that's why you can move the way you do. That's why you can move fluidly. Okay? Now, organelles are absent in prokaryotes, and they are present in eukaryotes. Okay? Three more. Now, metabolism, we're going to spend a whole chapter on metabolism. It'll actually be like 3 weeks from now that we start talking about metabolism. So I won't be including this on the quiz next week, but just so you know, most prokaryotes can be anaerobic or aerobic. Now, aerobic means that they require oxygen to create energy. Anaerobic means that they can create energy without oxygen. Do you think your cells are aerobic or anaerobic? And another way of asking that question would be, do your cells require oxygen to create energy? Yeah, almost everyone in class is shaking their heads. Yes. I can't see you guys on Zoom, but I hope you are as well. Yes, our cells are aerobic. They require oxygen to make energy. Now, prokaryotic cells, many do not. That means that they can produce energy without using oxygen. Okay? Last two. So, genetic material inside a prokaryote is located in the cytoplasm. It is not protected in a nucleus. In eukaryotes do have a nucleus, and you would find the genetic material inside of that nucleus for a eukaryotic cell. Okay, and then last but not least is reproduction. Most prokaryotic cells reproduce asexually. That means that there's no exchange of genetic information. Although some eukaryotes reproduce asexually, most reproduce sexually. Okay, and that means there is an exchange of genetic material. Do you need to go wipe that out? Yeah. Okay. Now, for tonight, if you missed anything in the slides, you can use this answer key to go back and fill it in. Once your slides are totally done, then you have a very short homework assignment tonight, and we will be grading that first thing in class tomorrow. You will be submitting it, so please make sure that you have that ready to go. Okay? We are really almost out of time. So are there any last minute questions for today before I end the Zoom?
What is a cell theory exit ticket?
Don't worry about that. We
Oh,
skipped
okay.
that today so I can show you the microscope.
Okay.
Okay? So you don't have to do that. I'm going to just give you credit for doing it. It's like participation points in class today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I haven't forgotten about the extra credit either. I'm just still waiting on 5 people to take the test. Okay? So I will get that to you as soon as possible. Emma, do tonight just the homework. I am not collecting your guided notes. Okay? So you should submit your prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells homework tonight. It is 8 questions where you're writing either E for eukaryote, P for prokaryote, or B for both. So I'll say like, does not have a nucleus. You would say prokaryotic. Okay. And then there are just 2 small questions after that. 2 short questions after that. So if you were looking to like how much time should you budget for that, I would say about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. Yes, Zinnia. Correct. I'm sorry. I assume that most people had already turned that in. Yes. Yes. So the clarification was, if you come to school every day, can you come to class? Yes. I do. I should have enough room for you. Okay. Now, usually alternate days. Tomorrow's more crowded than today, so you may have to sit there. But if that's okay, that didn't sound like it was okay. That sounded. Okay. All right. How about on Zoom? Any questions on Zoom? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing and end this for right now. Feel free to email me if questions do come up, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.